Welcome to the National Science and Technology Medals Foundation's STEM Spotlight Series, where we're meeting the top minds in STEM to learn more about their paths to success. I'm Allison Corton, and joining me today is Cathy Drennan, a professor of chemistry and biology at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and a professor and investigator with the Howard Hughes Medical Institute. In addition to her research on visualizing tiny molecular machines in motion, Dr. Drennan is passionate about developing resources to better teach chemistry to undergraduate and graduate students and equip them to be better science educators. Thank you so much for joining me today, Cathy.
Oh, I'm happy to be here.
Let's talk about your career path. When were you first interested in chemistry and what drew you to this field?
Oh, when was I first interested in chemistry? Well, I think I was naturally curious about the world when I was a kid. I loved animals, I loved nature, but chemistry, not so much. So when I took chemistry in high school, I would always arrange for my music lessons. I was in the chorus to be during the chemistry class, so I had to attend as few chemistry classes as possible until the teacher figured that out and said, "It's my understanding that you're supposed to rotate when the music lessons are." So I was caught, but I just did not like it. And then when I went to college, I was interested in studying biology and biopsychology. I wasn't sure what that was, but it sounded cool. And they said, "Well, if you're going to do anything biology related, you have to take introductory chemistry." I was like, no, don't make me do it. And I was like, I can tell you that chemistry has nothing to do with biology. And this is just a very bad move on your part. And they said, "Nope, no exceptions. You must take it." So I took it my first semester freshman year and fell in love with chemistry. And so I tell everyone, never say never. Never say you don't like something. Never say you never want to do that thing again. Because I said that I dislike chemistry and would never take it again. And then freshman year, love chemistry, and have been a chemist ever since. So be very careful what you say.
I love that. And I think a lot of people can sort of get on board with chemistry generally, but their eyes might glaze over a little bit when they hear the words metalloproteins and enzymes and X-ray crystallography. But this is a really important and fun area of research. Can you tell me a little bit about why this field is so exciting to be a part of?
Yes, so I love metalloproteins and I love crystallography, and I will tell you why. Partly because my connection, I liked biology in the beginning. I wanted to understand how things worked, and how the human body works and how organisms were different. And it's all about the chemistry that's happening inside the cell. And so, the cell is just chemical reactions happening that allow us to live. And I want to understand kind of the coolest chemistry that was happening inside the cell, not just some like little reaction that might be semi-important. I wanted to know how the difficult chemical reactions were being done in nature, in biology, in living cells. And it turns out that, the workhorses of the cells are protein molecules. But a protein by itself, which is made up of amino acids, can really only do so much chemistry, good chemistry. But often if it's a really hard reaction, it needs something extra. And so it needs a metal. And so that combination of a metal, say it's an iron atom, and we all know Iron Man of the Avengers, metals are powerful things. They're strong things. They're able to do really interesting chemistry. And so if you take a metal and you add it to the amino acids of protein, you can do the really hard reactions. And that fascinated me. I'm like, I need to understand how that works. All right. So I was fascinated by this thing, but how do you understand how something works that's too tiny to see it? So you can see a cell with a microscope, but I want to see into that cell. I want to see those protein molecules doing their thing. And to do that, you can't just use a regular microscope. You have to do something special. And one of the things you can do is this technique called X-ray crystallography. It allows you to see things that are as small as a protein molecule inside a cell, inside your body. So it's a view into the molecular world. So I get to see inside. So I'm kind of like the Ant-Man or something of science. I don't make myself small. I make the small things big, but I'm not quite in the quantum world, but I'm in the molecular world. And I'm an explorer of that molecular world. And I guess as a kid, I always wanted to be an explorer. And that's what I get to do. I get to explore and sort of see small things. There's really nothing better than that.
As I mentioned in your introduction, you devote a lot of time to thinking about and improving science education. What made you so passionate about this?
I think there are several things that made me really passionate about education. One is that, as I mentioned, I didn't see how wonderful chemistry was the first time I was exposed. And if I hadn't been forced to take it again, what would I be doing with my life? I don't really know. So a bad experience in education can really change one's trajectory, and a good experience can do the same. And so when I was teaching chemistry, I tell people that I didn't like it the first time I took it. And I said, some of you may not have found your love for chemistry. Maybe you'll find it this semester while taking chemistry. Maybe it'll be down the road. You will find your love for chemistry. So why not now? But I think it's just how things are taught is just so important. It really can make connections with people. And I think in science, a lot of what you learn in the beginning of science classes is a lot of nomenclature, a lot of language, and it can feel really overwhelming and difficult. And going into studying something, you think, oh, this is hard, this is confusing. Well, it's just that you don't know the language yet. It's not that it's necessarily difficult concepts. It's just you don't know what the words mean. And I think that if you can teach in a way that lowers that barrier, if you can explain things in a way that connects with people, it's like, oh, I know what you're talking about now. Or you're teaching people in a way that involves less memorization, or are honest and say, okay, there's a certain amount of memorization you have to do. We get through that, and then it becomes fun. It's like, learning a foreign language. You have to memorize enough words or know enough words, but then you get to have sentences. Then you get to read things. Then you get to really pursue the language and understand it. You may not really appreciate it the first time you're seeing it. And so I want people to try to help people appreciate it in the beginning and connect with it and realize, I can do this. It's not that hard. Maybe this part threw me off, but you know what? I can understand this. So that's part of what motivates me. I think the other thing is that I'm dyslexic, and I don't learn the way that everybody else learns. I don't read the way that other people read. And so I appreciate that not everybody is going to be the same in the way that they learn. That doesn't mean you can't learn. So I want to make sure that people have that access. They have I'm open to sort of different ways of teaching, open to different ways of connecting with students, because we have a lot of problems facing the world. I don't know if it's sort of right now as we're filming this, like cities are being, in Germany and in Belgium are being washed away by water. Climate change is real. It's happening. There's, we have the coronavirus, we have pandemic. We need scientists. Everyone who is interested in contributing to making the world a better place through science, we need to lower those barriers and bring everyone in. It's never been a more important time to be a scientist, and so many more people can do it than realize they can do it. And so that is a passion for me. I have a 13-year-old daughter, and I'm worried about the world she's growing up in. And so it's really important to me that we create another generation of scientists now that are able to tackle these hard problems. And educators need to step up and do their part to get a new generation ready to be scientists.
Absolutely. If you could make one change to our current approach to science education, what would that be? Are there broad scale policy changes that school systems or universities can make to help improve science education?
I think there's many different ways that one can improve things, but I don't think it needs to be big scale. I don't think that we need to do major changes. A lot of what I've done some research in education at MIT, where I've collected data on things that we've tried and innovative approaches. And one thing I discovered is that little tiny changes actually make a difference. So I know that teachers are so busy at all levels. I don't know anyone who's involved in education who has a lot of free time on their hands. It's a very hard job. And so, I think there's a problem if you say, okay, well, either you kind of do nothing to change things or you have to restructure everything. And I don't want people to think that. It's like, no, let's think about what you can do that maybe takes a few extra minutes in class. Swap out one activity with another activity. Well, one of the things that I've been working on is trying to create little short videos and other examples of why what people are learning, say, in high school chemistry is important in the real world and can be used for innovation, how it's being used in research and what chemists are actually doing. Like there's people doing chemistry research. What does that mean exactly? And that so much, I think, when people just see the applications, they're like, okay, I'm going to learn this because there's a reason I should know it. And, some of chemistry is hard. Some of people think it's hard. It's actually not too bad, but some of it is hard. But if you understand why you should learn it, you'll spend the time doing it. And so I think just, incorporating into a classroom some examples of how this is being used and also kind of showcasing who's doing the science. I think we have these visions of scientists from textbooks and things that are all, the people who discovered things way back when, men with powdered wigs and this kind of thing. And then you say, all right, do you see yourself as a scientist? Do you think you can be that? And you look at this image and you're like, I look nothing like, I don't really see myself as that person. And so really helping to showcase who scientists really are, and breaking some of these stereotypes like, well, if I don't have straight A's, I can't be a scientist. Well, that's not true at all. If I ever struggled in a science class, I can't be a scientist. Also not true at all. I'm not smart enough. These things, if you love science, you can be a scientist. So I feel like incorporating more of this into the classroom, incorporating more images of who scientists actually are, more about what people are really doing in science, why learning different things are important, really small, like just short little examples can make a huge impact on people's desire to learn the material and to start seeing themselves as potential scientists.
One of the key players in everything that you just spoke about, I think, is a good teacher. And I know that most academic scientists have to be involved in education to some degree, but some certainly see it as more of a burden. And unfortunately, I know there are some who think they have to choose between being a strong researcher and a good teacher. How do you balance being both a researcher and an educator?
The balance is certainly hard because there are only so many hours in the day. But I love teaching, and I see more and more young faculty members who are coming in and very excited about teaching. And I think that part of the change that I'm observing has to do with the requirements of the job of being a researcher. I do think that sort of back in the day, you could be in your lab at the bench, maybe talking to students in your lab and doing science, but communicating science was writing a very scholarly, sometimes dry science paper and putting it in one of the journals that everyone in your field read. And you knew your work would be out there and that people would know about it because everyone would pick up the Journal of the American Chemical Society and go through the table of contents every time the journal came out. I mean, that's just not true anymore. There's so many journals. There's another journal every week. There isn't a journal that everyone in your field is going to be looking through on a regular basis. People often find out what's exciting in the literature from Twitter these days. So, scientists, people think it's like science, this whole world's like, we use social media too. And so to get your work out there, to have people aware of what you're doing, you need to learn how to use social media. You need to learn how to give really good presentations, compelling presentations. You need to learn how to write in such a way that people will read your papers, because there's a bigger barrier to getting people to sit down and read these days. So your paper should be pretty easy to get through. It should be pretty clear. It should be well written. So communication skills for research scientists are now super important. And that didn't used to be true. Well, what else is useful if you have good communication skills? That plays into being a better teacher. So I think more and more researchers are being trained as communicators, which translates into better teaching in the classroom.
Some of the training you have developed is around an issue called stereotype threat. Can you talk a little bit about what this is and why it's so critical to train educators, particularly in the sciences, about how to reduce stereotype threat?
Everyone is aware of stereotypes. Whenever I'm with a group and I ask, give an example of a negative stereotype, the one that tends to come up in my circles is, women aren't good at math. That is a stereotype. It is an incorrect stereotype. So people hold these different stereotypes. Some of them can be positive too. The idea that, if it's an Asian student, they're probably good at science. So these are just sort of these general beliefs about populations of people. Some of them can be more or less true. Some are completely false, some positive, some negative. There's a stereotype, I work at MIT, that MIT students are smart. Again, a positive stereotype. Pretty much that's true. MIT students are in fact smart. So that's stereotype. Stereotype threat is the perceived risk of confirming a negative stereotype. So for example, you're a woman in a math class and you're thinking, I'm the only woman in here. If I don't do well in this class, then all of the other people in this class, all the men will think, yeah, women not good at math. And so I'm worried about this. I feel like it's not just about my math grade. It's like I'm carrying all of womankind on my shoulders. I better do well in this class. And so data has shown that this sort of fear can lead to underperformance. This anxiety level can cause people to underperform. And so I want everyone, in the classroom, if I have, if I have a classroom that has a lot of men in it, I want the women in the classroom to be feeling like, they're not worrying about underperforming. They're not carrying the weight of other women on their back. So that fear and that baggage that people bring into the classroom is going to potentially limit their ability to learn. And so we want to create an environment of trust and support where people are getting wise criticism, giving good feedback on how they're doing, and feedback that shows that the TAs or the instructors really believe that this person is capable of a higher level of achievement, even if maybe they've stumbled at one time or another, that they can really do their best. And so we talk a lot about strategies for doing this and kind of team building and trust building. And it's so much easier to take criticism or to take, if you're worried about how you're doing, if you feel that someone that's working with you really believes that you're capable of doing it. And so we talk about how to build those sorts of relationships that our students can really do well. And that's very important. And I do feel like, there's MIT students, they're really, really super smart, but building confidence, just like the rest of the world, we all could use a little more confidence.
Absolutely. You mentioned earlier, and you've been very open in the past about the fact that you have dyslexia. What has your journey with dyslexia taught you, and how has it shaped your career?
Yeah, so I was diagnosed as dyslexic back in first grade. And I grew up as an only child, and my parents, my father was a medical doctor. My mother had a PhD in anthropology. And they would talk to me about everything that was going on in the world. I was a very well-informed first grader, and I gravitated toward adults because of being an only child. And so I got into first grade, and I was having conversations with my first grade teachers about, events that were happening around the planet. Politics. I was always very interested in politics. It's a very strange child. And then they thought, this kid is like super smart and knows a lot of stuff. So they put me like in the top reading group. And that was not where I belonged. So it's like bumped down, next reading group, next, until way down in the sort of remedial reading group. And they just, the teachers didn't there was a disconnect. And it between sort of how I was talking about the world and my ability to read. And so they talked to my parents about this, and my mom decided she would get to the bottom of it. And dyslexia was not something that most people was on the radar of most educators at that time. And but I grew up in New Jersey area, and it was near New York City, and she found some experts, and I was diagnosed. Apparently my dyslexia was so severe that my parents were told that I would never graduate from high school. But my parents decided she doesn't need to know that. So they kept that part of it from me. And they got me a tutor and worked with me. And, I think they thought, our daughter, she's smart. Let's see what happens. So I graduated from high school. I actually ended up graduating in 3 years. I was left back in sixth grade because first time through sixth grade, I still hadn't figured out how to read. Second time through sixth grade, somehow it clicked and I was able to read. So I went from in sixth grade being in the remedial class to in seventh grade, I was mainstreamed. And then by ninth grade, I was in honors classes. So then I decided to go to Vassar College. And at that point, I hid my dyslexia. I didn't want people to know I was dyslexic. I was embarrassed by it. And I was afraid that, the kind of get letters of recommendation that would say, oh, she's really smart or talented for a dyslexic person. I didn't want any qualifiers. And I now look back and I think that was a mistake. I think that was me being immature. And I tell everyone now that if you get extra time because you're dyslexic, take it. Just take it. But I didn't then. And then I went and taught high school. Right after college, I taught high school. And it was when I was teaching high school and had students that some of them had disabilities, some of them were, real honor students. And I realized that one shouldn't be embarrassed by things like being dyslexic. And it took me kind of to be on the teacher side of it to sort of see that you are who you are. Everyone has strengths and weaknesses, and just embrace all parts of you. But I think it's been more in recent years that I've been actively talking about it, because I think that it does make a difference for people to see that, we all have strengths and weaknesses, and that one should never let one aspect of who you are determine anything about what you're capable of doing.
Yeah, I think it's so important what you're talking about, this aspect of you have to see it to be it. That's like sort of a common phrase that's tossed around a lot. And I'm wondering if you maybe had any standout mentors or folks who helped you along your way, someone who you looked up to, and maybe why is mentoring both formal and informal so key for scientists?
Yeah, and mentoring is absolutely key. I think it's key for lots and lots of people, but science in particular, it is sort of like an apprenticeship when you're in the lab and you really are being trained by an expert. And it's just so important. And anyone who sort of thinks that somehow being mentored by someone else is a weakness, it is not. Being willing to accept advice and learn from others, it really is so important. So I like to have lots of mentors, and I feel like the mentors don't always have to be people who are advanced from you. You can learn from anybody. I feel like there's so many days where I just learn from my graduate students, and it's just, just accept accept mentoring from all corners. Everyone, it takes a village to mentor every person, and I embrace my village. I need my village. I would say I was very fortunate, very lucky to have good mentors, but I also think that it wasn't exactly luck in that case. I think I sought it out, and I recognized how important this would be. And when I talk to a lot of people, deciding where to go to grad school or where to do a postdoc or where to be an undergrad and what lab to work in and sort of, all these sort of things, that they say, well, but this is like a really fancy person. They have, they've done this thing, or this is a fancy school, and shouldn't I go work for this person because it's the fanciest thing I could do? And I said, really, if you're going to be working with someone, pick someone who's going to be the best mentor. That is the single most important thing that you will do. Because if you're being well mentored, what you're capable of doing, and that's what, your success, your personal success as a scientist that's going to carry you. And so if you're being well mentored, what you're able to achieve is much greater. So I'd say I'm lucky with the mentors I have, but I also feel like I sought out people knowing that mentoring was going to be important to me. And I picked people to work for because they would be good mentors. So it wasn't just luck, and it shouldn't just be luck. You shouldn't rely on luck. You should seek out good mentors.
So for students who might be watching and are considering a career in chemistry or biochemistry, are there any particular skills that you think are important to hone early in their education or in their career?
I think one of the most important traits, not so much a skill, is just being curious. So, a lot of just very, very basic things of dissecting out what is known, what is not known, and being curious to kind of express, like, that doesn't seem, that news story or that data or that, really? Did that happen? Let me get into that and sort of research it and think about it. If you were going to say this, what would you need to know about this situation to be able to say that that is true? So, that's sort of what a scientist does. And I feel like you can work on that in every class that you're taking, even in your non-science class, just being able to think about things, reason out things, consider this sort of there are certain things that are somewhat black and white, but a lot of life is in the gray areas. So, think about that and work on logic and reasoning skills. Exercise your brain in all of your classes. That will get you where you need to go.
I love that. If you could give one piece of advice to students who are still trying to figure it out about what they want to do in the world and how to find their way, what would you say to those students?
Along the mentoring lines, I would say build your support network. I think anything worth doing in life is going to be challenging. And people are capable of doing just absolutely incredible things, but they're not able to do that all by themselves. They need a support network. They can be the front person, but they need people believing in them, supporting them as they go. And those people who support you, some people have a really strong support from family members. Some people don't. Maybe it's friends. Maybe it's people your own age. Maybe it's someone that you reach out to who is a teacher, maybe not even your teacher. It can be all sorts of different individuals, but build those relationships, develop those networks, because especially doing science, people say it's called research because you have to redo it. Most experiments fail. So what it's really about is picking yourself up, dusting yourself off, and going back again. And so learning how to be resilient and developing the support network that you need that helps you be resilient. That's the most important thing. Build your community. And it could be all sorts of different people in that community. It can be sometimes people that you otherwise have nothing in common with, but they may be there for you. They may be that person that helps dust you off when you fail at something. And it is, if you're not struggling in something, you're not pushing yourself hard enough. The struggle is important. The struggle is good. The struggle is not a sign that you're not able to do it. The struggling through things is a sign that you do have what it takes to get through it because you're trying, you're working at it. But get that support to help you, because you can't control life, but you can control how you respond to the bad things that happen if you have that right community.
So our last question here is a little bit of a different tact. What are you reading, watching, or listening to right now, STEM related or otherwise, that you're really enjoying?
Right now, actually, I am rewatching Modern Family. And it is so funny. It is just so funny. And I feel like, during the pandemic, comedies just go way up in terms of their importance. And it's a good thing to do to sometime just laugh. Yeah. So Modern Family is my thing right at the moment.
Wonderful. Well, that concludes our conversation. Thank you so much for joining me today. It has been a pleasure speaking with you, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Well, thank you so much.